start recording now. And after the lecture, there'll be questions and answers session. So if you have a question, please type them in the chat box and we'll read them out to our speaker. And before I introduce our fantastic speaker, I would like to welcome a few of our guests. I can see Eva Iricna, our former speaker from the last lecture. Hello, Eva. Good to see you. I can see a representative of the Polish embassy in London, Clarinda. Hello. And I can see Marian Zastawny from the Association of Polish Engineers in Britain. I can also see several people from the Polish Hearth Club. Welcome all. And welcome all our guests. So a couple of words about us, Architectural Moment. So we are a group of friends interested in architecture and also people behind architecture. That's why we organize these events. And the main goal is to educate, promote and provoke a discussion about architecture among us architects, but also perhaps mainly among non-architects. So our speaker tonight is Teresa Borsuk, an award-winning architect of a Polish origin. So Teresa has been working for Pollard Thomas Edwards Architects for over 3 decades. There's a long story to be said. And then she's an architect, but in her career she also worked as a developer, acted as a developer, contractor. She was a judge on several architectural competitions. She's the RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects Client Design Advisor. And in 2015, Teresa has been awarded a Woman Architect of the Year for a contribution in promoting equality and diversity in our profession. And as I said earlier, Teresa has a very interesting Polish connection and a very interesting story, which I can't wait to hear more about. And I was wondering, perhaps if I can, this could be one of the questions, I wonder if that has shaped you as an architect somehow. You obviously must have shaped you as a person, but I wonder whether that had any influence on your determination to be successful and also a determination to bring a good environment for all of us. So Teresa, over to you. I'm going to share the screen now. So please tell me when shall I flip the slides.
Lovely, thank you. Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for asking me to speak this evening. And thank you, Roman, for the introduction. I'm very aware that your previous speakers have been renowned and very august professionals. And I hope this talk, which is about a much humbler career, will not disappoint. And I hope that the technology holds out for us all. So my talk this evening is rather eclectic. It covers a little bit about my background, my career as an architect, my role in promoting women in architecture, and a little bit about my work. The title, as you can see here, is Home. So why home? Well, because home is fundamental to so many basic things in life. Next slide, please, Roman. I mean, from a very early age, we start drawing home and we have a vivid image of home. And home is not only a place where one lives or one was brought up, but it also has reference to feelings of belonging. It should be a refuge, a sanctuary, a place of safety, security, comfort, happiness, and joy. And home captures the importance of having a home. And hopefully this talk will help explain to you why I'm so preoccupied by the importance of home. Next. Essentially, I grew up in England in a Polish household. My parents, now deceased, were both from Poland. My grandparents, my father's parents, lived with us. My uncles and aunts and my cousins lived close by. We lived amongst other Poles in a Polish community, and I attended Polish school on Saturday mornings. I danced in a Polish national dance group. We ate Polish food. And hard as it may be to believe now, Polish was actually my first language. We spoke Polish at home. How could we have spoken anything else? My parents and grandparents did not speak English. So to all intents and purposes, life at home was very Polish. Next. So what were my parents doing in England? Well, they both came from neighbouring areas in eastern Poland, just to the southeast of Lwów, from an area which is now the Ukraine. And in February 1940, just after the start of the Second World War, they and their respective families were deported by the invading Soviets to different hard labor camps in Siberia. My father and his family to near Omsk, and my mother and hers to Krasnoyarsky Krai. And you can see these locations at the center of the map, marked with black circles. My father was 14 and my mother was 8. And they were in these camps for 2 years, from 1940 to 1942. My mother lost both her parents here and ultimately a sister. And then in the summer of 42, after the amnesty, when the Russians became allies, the Poles were effectively set free. By now, starved and emaciated by their traumas, they made their own way to Russia's southern border to address the next steps in their fate. Next slide. And to cut a long story short, my father joined Under's army, and my mother, now orphaned, with her younger sister, were transported to a camp for displaced persons in Africa, Tengero, in what was then Tanganyika and is now Tanzania. And this is how they spent the Second World War. My father with the army, taking him through Iran, Palestine, and ultimately to Italy and Monte Cassino, and my mother in Tengero in Tanzania. My father arrived in England just after the war in 1946, and my mother 2 years later in 1948. Next, please. They both started life here in a resettlement camp. These were former Army and Air Force camps used as temporary accommodation, first for the Polish troops and then their families. These camps were scattered across the whole of the UK, and effectively they were Nissen huts, each occupied by several families. They weren't very well equipped, they had poor lighting, little heating, no ventilation. But for this generation of Poles, they became a symbol of stability, their first homes in the UK, and would remain in their memory essentially as happy places. And the Poles frequently referred to them as beczki śmiechu, a barrel of laughs. My parents met and married in 1949. Next. So I'm sure that you can appreciate that why, after such a disrupted childhood and youth, the creation of home, security, and stability was of utmost importance to my parents and had a great influence on me. As I've said, both my parents spent most of their formative years at war, and as such, had missed out on so much of their childhoods, youth, and education. And growing up, I had a real sense of that. And perhaps in some way, I wanted to make up for the opportunities that they didn't have. So I think from a young age, I was fairly determined. And as I've said, the war put a stop to their conventional education and formal qualifications. They were intelligent people, but coming to England and not speaking the language didn't really help. So they deferred to the trades. Next. They were both very good at making things. And in fact, my father would frequently take things apart so he could understand how they were put together. and then put them back together again. So this too had a great influence on me. And from a young age, I was very interested in how things were made. And then another big influence that was that when I was about 8, my family were considering moving home. Next, please. We regularly received sales information from estate agents, which I found completely absorbing. My father and I would go to look at prospective homes, and I was fascinated by what I saw. And I think that that definitely helped further encourage my complete obsession with home. And that was it, really. I decided at the age of 8 to be an architect. Next. At primary school, my ambition was acknowledged with a polite nod, a sort of, there, you'll get over it. After all, this was the 60s. And at senior school, which was an all-girls convent school, they translated architecture into interior design. Perhaps they were afraid that I was setting my bar too high. So, as you might imagine, this lack of encouragement just made me even more determined. Next. Ultimately, I got a place at the Bartlett School of Architecture in London. Of course, architecture was really nothing like any of the subjects I'd studied at school, but I was completely hooked. For me, it was that perfect balance of arts, science, creativity, and theory. And by the time I finished my 3rd year, I still wanted more. Next. And I was lucky enough to have won a scholarship for a further undergraduate year in America at Kansas University. Not only was it great to be able to experience university life in the States, but that year Kansas also hosted an architectural convention which included architects such as Charles Moore, Robert Stern, Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown and Richard Myers. It was a wonderful year and an unforgettable experience. Next. After the year in the States, I came back to London to complete the work experience year of my training. And at the time, the Bartlett ran a scheme where they arranged 6 months on a building site and 6 months in an architectural office. My 6 months on site was spent on this building, level 42, what was then called the NatWest Tower. And it was one of the largest development sites in London at the time. What an experience that was. Next. Significantly, aside from discovering how a construction site operated, I learned how to deal with being on site with 500 men. Remembering that my career began at the time of the mid-1970s feminism, when the lad culture of the construction industry was still acceptable, and site huts and even journals were full of images of scantily clad women. This job on site was excellent training. Next. For a woman in particular, working on a construction site was a really unique opportunity. So when I completed my diploma, I was determined to continue the experience. And I managed to get a job sponsored by the RIBA as a site supervising officer, converting a Victorian barn into a community centre in Bolton. Next. This is an image of the Hellman cartoon at the time featured in the Architects Journal, where they were advertising the position. You can see that they were clearly expecting a man for the job. Ah, the naivety and confidence of youth. What was I thinking? How did I have the gall to imagine that I could manage this job? I can't begin to tell you how much I learnt in that short stint of running a small site and a construction project. I learned about construction, but perhaps more importantly, I learned about myself. Next. Then it was back to London, back to an architect's office. And actually, here is where I experienced my first resistance to my gender. It's difficult to pin down, but there was evidently a problem, and every day presented some unnecessary sexist challenge. I kept having to defend myself as a woman in the profession. At first, I thought it was good training. If I could deal with this, I could cope with most things. But ultimately, it was draining. And one day, I resolved that I didn't have to put up with it any longer and began to look for a new job. Next. I arrived at Pollard Thomas Edwards, where I still am, some 36 years later. Pollard Thomas Edwards was refreshing from the start in so many ways. The practice was founded on an unusual set of aims: commitment to finding out what end users really want, a belief that new buildings should be respectful of their surroundings, an enthusiasm for complex, messy and redundant sites, a belief that good design coupled with intelligent use of money and commitment to social and environmental change makes property development a force for good. One of the founding partners' mantras was, "Money is the only building material. Use it carefully." And all of this still informs the core values of the practice today. We have a rigorous questioning approach, cultivating designs that are intelligent and imaginative. We try to find the value and joy in every project. We place great importance not only on the way that buildings look, but also on the way they're made, the way they're used, and the way they age. Next, please. Our projects include the whole spectrum of residential development and other essential ingredients that make thriving and sustainable places. They span all scales and sectors, from housing developments to urban and rural master plans, and encompasses schools, third age housing, co-housing projects and workspace. Many combine new and old and works to listed building. And perhaps more unusually for architects, since the 1979 Charter allowed it, PTE has carried out property development in its own right. Next. We design homes and places where people want to live, and that's been core to the practice's work since the very beginning. I'm not sure how many homes we've built over the life of the practice, but just to give you an idea, these are the numbers of what we completed in 2019. Next, please. Many of you in this business will appreciate today's challenges of delivering enough homes to achieve the required numbers. Achieving housing targets, it's an enormous task, and there's no wonder that sometimes numbers can rule the day, and that we start to refer to the places where people live as units. At Pollard Thomas Edwards, the use of the word unit when home is meant is banned. It's surprising what a difference it makes to your thinking. Whether we're designers, developers, or housing providers, we need to remember that every unit is someone's home. Home is where the heart is, and it's unlikely to be found in a unit. Home captures the importance of having a loving home and a home that's loved. The very word evokes the essence and qualities that home needs to be and to have, whereas unit or units is more associated with achieving numerical targets. The term suggests and promotes quantity over quality. It lacks both human soul and aspiration. And only if we think of home can we begin to focus on what is valued and the qualities that we can bring to create homes that are cherished. Next. At Pollard Thomas Edwards, the notion of home is taken through to where and how we work. This is D. Specker Wharf, our canal side office in Islington, and the building provides a lively and sociable working environment, which is a visible expression of the practice's ethos. I thought you might also enjoy the photo on the bottom right, and this is from one of our many office trips, this one to Warsaw, which many still say is the most remarkable and memorable office trip that we've ever had on so many counts. But coming back to the office and home, evidently with COVID, things have changed a bit, and we've had to adopt all sorts of techniques and programs to maintain our ethos and soul through virtual communication. Next. But just to give you an idea of our pre-COVID days, every Thursday, one person in the office cooks lunch for the whole practice and any guest who happens to be in the practice that day. Everyone takes their turn, and the practice is 150 people, so it's no mean feat. Next, please. And this lunch is more than just a social event. You can imagine employees lavish the same care and attention to detail on office lunch as they would on an architectural project, observing the concepts of good project management, the design, preparation, and delivery of a tasty meal on time and to budget. Next, it's a custom that has taken place since the start of the practice over 40 years ago, when the founders, Pollard, Thomas and Edwards, recognised that since we spend so much time at work, it should be an enjoyable place to be. They set out to create a family ethos. After all, they do say, the family that eats together stays together. To them, a balanced workplace and workforce was not different or special, it just reflected real life. That homely vibe is still with us today and extends beyond the office lunch. It embraces a really strong sense of social responsibility. Next. When I joined the office in the mid-80s, the office already had a refreshing balance of men and women. There's never been an overt policy or deliberate attempt to create a gender balance, but rather a conscious effort to engender a social and cultural environment which supports equality, diversity, and inclusivity. Today, about 50% of PTE architects are women. 4 of the 7 partners are women who manage large portfolios of work, as well as the financial, technical, and operational aspects of the business. The women at PTE are highly visible, vocal, and successful, and provide natural role models. Next. There are many statistics and studies that suggest that companies perform better where there is a gender balance. Equality in the workplace is just good for everyone. And of course, none of this should set up any opposition between men and women. Making things better for women will also make it better for men. More engagement and support from men is crucial in raising this momentum. But the good news is that a large majority of men agree that balanced workforces make for a better working environment and generate better company performance. It's obvious, isn't it? Next. There are no magic formulae, no silver bullets or quick fixes. We all need to work to help influence the predominant business models, to help establish an ethos that will help to retain women in the profession, to embrace diversity and inclusivity. We all acknowledge that the practice of architecture is demanding and requires inordinate amounts of time and commitment. But it's also a business. And as a business, it has a responsibility to manage and sustain and maintain its workforce. The outcome will be more women in senior and leadership positions. And in a position of leadership, you automatically a role model and you automatically help to promote other women. It just makes good business sense. And now for a little bit about my work. The next few slides show a few of the projects that I've been directly responsible for at Pollard, Thomas and Edwards. And then I think we're going to end with a short film, hoping that the technology will work, but I think Roman and Arthur have got that sorted. So next slide, please. So the next slide, just to housing. Most of our work is actually based in and around London and the South East. And these images show various housing projects in London, Cambridge and Oxford. The projects range in size from sort of 90 homes to those that involve larger master plans and perhaps over 1,000 homes. So they're not only about the home itself, but also about making places. Next, I mentioned earlier that Pollard Thomas Edwards has carried out a whole number of projects as developers in their own right. And in these cases, we are both client and architect. And here are just a few images of a number of those projects. The project, in fact, the project on the left, which is Angel Waterside, which is just down the road from our office. On this project, we actually acted as developers, architects, and main contractors. It's a mixed-use, mixed-tenure residential development with business space and a canal-side park. And it opens up the canal basin to the public for the first time ever. The project in the middle is Connaught Gardens, 7 townhouses in Muswell Hill, so a small development, but we're particularly proud of it as it won an award for the perfect home plan. Next, please. As we know, many town centres are struggling with the decline of traditional retail, and probably now even more so with the predicted decline of office accommodation, and so require a complex mix of uses to bring them back to life. And here are just three examples of mixed-use town centre projects in Chelmsford, Cambridge and Walthamstow. They combine homes with other uses. The project on the left is in Walthamstow, and it combines 120 homes, a multiplex cinema and restaurants. The cinema is buried deep in the heart of the site, whilst the street frontages are lined with retail, and then the residential sits over this. The project, immediately it was finished, radically transformed the area and was the catalyst for much subsequent regeneration in Waltham Forest. Next. Many of our projects involve combining new and old, and one of my first projects at PTE was the refurbishment and conversion of the former Royal Free Hospital complex in Islington, and that's the project on the left. And this transformed a listed redundant hospital into a thriving residential community, combining new and converted buildings. I mean, most of the existing buildings were gutted. And so if you look at that main building there, it looks like it's 3 floors, but in fact, it's got 6 new floors in it. Anyway, so it's about 200 homes, a major public square, and New Islington Square effectively at the heart of the development. And it was one of the largest social housing projects in the country at the time, small by today's standards. But the key to unlocking this site, which had lain empty and derelict for over a decade, was the demolition and rebuilding of 2 listed buildings. And you can see the top left-hand image. We obtained permission from English Heritage to knock down the link buildings and rebuild them to slightly different proportions, which enabled the ways through the arches to be wide enough to allow modern vehicles to access the heart of the site. The project's 30 years old and so evidently of its time, but it still looks great today and is loved and cared for by those who live there. And it still very much represents the practice's approach. Develop the vision, move heaven and earth to get over the hurdles, and build with care and patience. Next. And then I wanted to include this slide because although we're probably best known for our residential projects. And I've talked a lot about home, but there's sort of a home in a workplace as well. And these are two headquarters office buildings, Gunpowder Mill in Waltham Abbey and the Granary in Barking. And we were very honoured to be asked to do these for two of our contracted developer clients as their headquarters building. Both epitomise PT's approach to working with existing buildings. Carefully consider what's there before you remove anything, respect the patterns of age, touch the existing fabric as lightly as possible, mend invisibly where appropriate, and accommodate new interventions considerately. Right, I'm now going to end with a film. Hopefully it will work. It's a project that we completed a number of years ago, 76 homes in Saffron Walden. And I think it captures how architecture can embrace that essence of home. And I'll let the film speak for itself. I think the key thing when you came to the site is the avenue of lime trees. I mean, it was just self-evident that this was really something we should work with.
The application was on part of the playing fields of the Friends School, which, as you can imagine, was quite controversial. We don't have much design like this in Uttlesford. We're perhaps quite traditional in a lot of ways, so it's quite nice to have something that's a bit different.
As an organisation, every scheme we do is bespoke. We don't have standard house types, and we believe quite strongly in allowing our architects enough freedom for them to develop their own ideas for a site.
They were quite brave because Saffron Walden is quite conservative. We were determined to push the sort of bounds of contemporary.
Because of the type of units proposed and the design, but also the benefits to the school, overall the councillors decided that it was something they wanted to support.
Other developers might have just sat back and said, actually, we need to stick with the conventional because we're not sure of the marketplace here, and who indeed were our marketplace.
It is a unique development, and because each house is different, I like the fact that it's a mixture of brick, of the black timber frame, of these gingerbread slats. I don't know how you describe them, to be honest.
It is a pretty unique design style, but still picking up in certain parts of local design vernacular.
Everything we do is geared to the specific site to which it relates.
You'll have detached houses on a street. There'll be some houses in a terrace. You've got courtyard housing, and that's interesting because there are about 6 or 7 houses located around a courtyard, and that courtyard actually works quite hard in terms of what it has to do. It's the driveway for each house. It acts as an amenity space. It deals with all of the servicing issues for each house. It's a sort of a semi-private space.
It was, I think, how it's modern houses in a sort of a natural setting. So we really like the trees and the avenue, how it was kept, how all the architecture was different. So you've got the cedar shingle and then you've got the sort of black clapperboard and the brick. It was a very exciting to look at.
What we wanted to also do was create character areas which were very much about the specific context and location on the site. And as well as that, we were determined to ensure that every house really optimised its specific location in terms of view, aspect, and so every house should work individually as well as together with its neighbours.
When we actually look out at the front of our house, although we're looking on to a roadway, there isn't any concrete, there isn't any tarmac. There's a nice contrast of brick to wood to greenery.
By using varying materials, by investing in landscaping, we can ensure that all our buildings have a soft frontage, have a frontage rather than just a hard curb edge.
We took the members on a tour of it last summer to have a look at the development, to try and learn things from it, and they were really pleased with the difference of design, the courtyards, the way that the trees had been used and integrated into the development.
Well, I was born in Saffron Walden. I don't live here. My nephew lives here, but I visit him often. And it's lovely. I think it's a real improvement in the town. And I know everybody in the town really likes the development. And the thoroughfare here is lovely. I mean, I think it's loads of space. It feels really safe for kids riding their bikes or walking up and down. It's great.
I think our children started it off, but it's a very popular place to scoot up and down, practice cycling. Also from the avenue we get to see everybody walk past, so we get to know our neighbours quite well as well.
And actually this is what creates a place, it's to really express individuality as well as togetherness, I suppose.
That attention to detail means that you've got the variety that everybody seeks in the places that they want to live, rather than just living in another box next to another box.
So other developers might come here and think, well, how do they make this work? Because you can't really see any repetition. And I think that's the trick, actually, some intelligent replication in key components, windows, doors, but also in parts of the house plan.
We're proud of the development. We wouldn't have taken our councillors there to have a review of it if we didn't think it was as good. And we're pleased that the development has matured well so quickly.
We wanted to make sure that when we walked away from this scheme, we were all proud of having contributed something new to the town.
Yeah, I'll tell you what really jumps out at me. I think it does show is that people really love living here. One of the most lovely things I saw within the courtyard, where a person was happy enough to leave an umbrella and boots and a bag outside on the doorstep. You know, they were nowhere to be seen, and I just think, that's home. It must be home.
Wow, what a lecture. I think it's like the film just says everything. I mean, happy client is the best reward for an architect.
Wait, I can hardly hear you.
Oh, really? Sorry. No, I said like a fantastic lecture. I'll speak louder. And what I wanted to say, like a happy client is the best reward for an architect, right? We get paid for what we do. But if we say thank you, the client says, oh, we're so pleased with the house we're in, or the office, or any space, then that's the best reward for us, isn't it?
The happy clients being the people who live in the houses?
Yeah.
Or the developer?
Yeah, both. Yeah, actually, you also have the developer who is happy with your design.
Yeah.
That's good. But I think to me, it's more important. Well, the developer is usually our client, but you know, the users, you know, that's also
absolutely.
like beautiful.
No, absolutely.
And there's like very inspiring lecture, Teresa, uplifting, you know, the first section of the history was almost like a tear pressing, you know, is an amazing story. And then the hard work in diversity in architecture, there's also like, I can see with my own eyes over the last 15 years that I've been here, that it brought an effect. You know, I think there were more men when I came to Britain working in architecture offices than there are now. So that brought effects. You know? So, I don't know, Arthur, are you controlling the chat box?
Yes,
questions?
I'm going to jump in here. I think amazing. The last part was really eye-opening. I mean, this is when you see the clients and also developer clients, but also the clients living in that house. That's an amazing testimony to actually what's happening there, and you can sense that people live there and they just enjoy it. That's the real architecture, isn't it? That's the essence. It's not really building blocks and volume.
I want to say one of the woman with the child, she's got 4 children, and she said 4 older children, so she has 5 children, and she said this is the first house that they've lived in where the children didn't squabble over which bedroom to have. And she said to me, do you know, every bedroom's got something special, a special feature. Did you realize that? And what was lovely was the fact that, you know, it's obviously something we had thought about and put in, but it's great that they'd picked up on it as well and realised that.
I
So
that would be the different view from the window, isn't it? It's almost going back to the very, very much loved by me, the building called Villa Rotonda by Palladio, where that house is central based. But the amazing feature about it is that it's got four, that is exactly the same entrances and views to the inside, but four completely different views to the outside. Every time you stand in that house somewhere, you just look at something different outside, which is amazing. That's really good. I'm just gonna go back to what we supposed to be going back to, which is the question Q&A session, if that's okay with you, Teresa?
yeah, definitely, yes, of course.
I can see there are no questions in the chat box.
Yes.
I'm looking in the wrong place. So perhaps if anyone would like to ask a question, I think there are many of us, but I think we can let people speak. You know, like if you just raise your hand, if you would like to ask a question, well, you have to be on the camera because most of the people.
Yeah, that would be great. If I could start.
Okay, Eva has a question. Okay,
yeah.
so Eva, you have to unmute yourself. So I'm allowing you to unmute yourself. Eva, you have to unmute yourself. You have to press the button that will let you speak. Oh, we can hear you. You have to you must have a button somewhere that will let you unmute yourself. Oh God.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, is it okay? Well,
yeah.
I really haven't got a question. I just would like to thank you extremely because I was so touched by everything what you said. And of course, I'm older than you are, but you reminded me of so many things in my own life. Like, for example, you know, when I was told that I should do interiors because it's not appropriate for a woman to read architecture. And of course, I worked on building site with 400 men as an only woman. And to be honest, I never had a bad experience on a building site, never, which I think that I'm extremely grateful for. I do know it exists, but you took us so nicely through your beginnings, through your family, through the way how you decided to read architecture, and eventually showing the projects on which you work for. And I would specifically like to thank you for one thing, which you said, how good it is to have collaboration of men and women, especially in architecture. It is very unpopular for a woman to say that we can't do without men. And I have run into so many problems having mentioned it, because quite a number of women think that now we reached the point, having been not appreciated for so long, that we can do everything on our own. Yes, we can, but I think it's so much better to work in a group of people, which actually is preferably 50-50, because the way of collaboration between specifically architects, men and women, gives such better results than if it is done either solely by one sex or the other. And I think that I was really touched with your attention to detail and with your humanity, which you can read through all the projects. So I don't have any questions, but I've never worked, on this type of projects as you have been working on. We work on blocks of flats at the moment, but they are tall buildings and completely different to what you do. But I really admire it, and I'm completely, totally taken by your 35 minutes or how many you have taking us through so many things. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Eva. That's very generous.
Thank you, Eva. That's nice. That's nice to say.
I
think we have a question.
Sorry, can I just say, in response to Eva, yes, I didn't ever come across any issue with being a woman on a building site at all. The only time it happened to me was in an architect's office. So there you go.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
That speaks for itself.
Yes.
I have a question from the public, if that's okay. Ms. Katarzyna Czepiga is asking, she says, thank you for the lecture. I enjoyed it a lot. what advice would you give young woman architect starting their own her own company?
In starting your own company?
Yes.
Oh, well, the first advice I'd give to a woman architect is believe in yourself. Yes. So I think that probably goes to starting your own company. You know, don't be put off by others. Believe in yourself.
Yeah, I'll start with another question then. I'm just going to go back slightly to the early years and your early experiences and your origin coming back or coming from Poland. In fact, being brought up here on different soil, speaking different language, and having that experience of attending Saturday school to learn that different language, different for you because at the end of the day, English became, just like for my kids, their first language.
Yeah.
Did you feel different? Did you feel proud or did you feel confused?
Yeah. Right. So remember, I was growing up in the late 50s, early 60s. Yes. And, you know, I felt I didn't want to be different, actually, when I was very young. And I remember, I mean, I can give you an example that, you know, I went to school and then somebody said, well, what did you have for tea last night? And I thought, how on earth am I going to explain Plutsky and Kwaszna Śmietana to anyone here? So I said, beans on toast. And this sort of, I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to stand out. It was bad enough. My surname isn't very difficult to pronounce, but it was bad enough having to spell my surname. My parents actually named my sister and I names which were spelt the same in English and in Polish so that we didn't stand out. But by the time I got to about the age of 14, I thought, why am I hiding this actually? This is very rich. Why aren't I embracing it? And it was a big sort of release and realization then. And then I thought, I just embraced both cultures, both sets of opportunities. And actually a lot of my school friends, who I still know now, said, well, it was really lucky for you, wasn't it? Because you could just choose what you wanted to be when you wanted to be it. So, but that was a turnaround. But the first few years it was difficult having parents who didn't speak English or couldn't write English. You know, how did you write the note to the teacher? How did they go to parents' evening if they couldn't speak the language? I mean, it's much more accepted now, but at that time, it was quite tough.
Thank you. I've got a question from the public now. Thank you for your lovely lecture. Ms. Eva Gluza says, I would like to know how is the process of consultation with residences, especially with Pew area? Would that make sense, the question?
No, I didn't understand the last bit.
Eva, would you like to ask that question personally? Can we put Eva on?
Yeah, exactly. Eva, 1 second. Let me just find you. Oh yeah, I can see you now. Okay, so press unmute. You have to unmute. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes, good evening. My name is Eva Gluza. I'm in Oxford now, and it's my area, which is a Blackbell, is in Oxford. I don't know, Teresa will know this area.
I do, yes.
Yes, so we will have new regeneration project and with catalysts and something like that. And it's so big discussion with residents and big angries with, you know, residents, how we have to, why, and something like that. And it's like your work, basically, as an architect, may please these residents and ensure them where, you know, all the building will be fine with the structure, with the green areas, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. So my question is, how difficult is the process with negotiation with this, you know, residents in a area where you want to build anything, you know, something?
Well, you know, it can be tricky because a lot of people don't like change, do they? But what we find, we do a lot of resident consultation, and I think you've got to start early in the process, and you have to involve people, and you don't, you know, involve them, embrace their, remember, they probably know more about the area that they live in and the issues than you do. And I think you need to give them time and embrace what they come up with and their ideas, and listen. And you have to listen carefully. So you don't come with ideas already. You listen to what they say, and the ideas evolve from what they say. Now, of course, but I think also there are techniques, aren't there? And actually what we find is that if you listen to people in smaller groups, you get a much, much closer sort of one-to-one relationship than if you hold big community meetings. And big community meetings might mean that the people who are angriest shout loudest and take over the meeting, and then that doesn't work. Or it means that those people who don't really shout aren't heard. So there are various techniques, but I think the important thing is to listen, and listen carefully, and show that you've listened by coming back the next time and saying, we heard this.
Thank you. I'll come up with another question from the public. Clara, is that okay if you ask the question personally?
Yeah, Clara, I will unmute you. I think you can speak now. Hello?
Yes,
Clara?
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, can
yeah,
you hear
we can
me?
hear you. Yeah, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Fascinating lecture, Teresa, and congratulations to the organizers. I liked what you said, Teresa, about not using the word unit consciously in your office. And I was wondering if you think people's expectations of a home have changed or evolved throughout these years, throughout your career?
Oh yes, yes, and actually continue to evolve. And I think we've learned a lot about home over, well, we've probably all learned a lot about our homes over the last 6 months, haven't we? So I think, yes, definitely. And I think, remember, ambitions have also changed. When you think, I mean, I was just talking to Roman about it earlier today, about how much there is about home on television now. So yes, I don't think it's static. And I think that's the wonderful thing about it. But I mean, I don't think that makes it any less important. I think that just makes it even more powerful, actually.
Thank you.
I have a question from Architecture Moments. Now it's just going into the work zone. There was no mention yet fully, but if you could maybe elaborate a bit more, where did that idea of a flexible working environment came from? I mean, this led to a change of structure of PT, I understand.
Yeah.
Was it a personal experience or a growing social understanding of an issue?
So this is quite interesting, actually. So we were being, it's quite tricky, isn't it? We were being approached by people more and more, you know, this is in about 2018. Could people work from home? Could I do something at home? Or I'll be, you know, and of course, the one thing you have to be is fair across the board. And when you've got 150 people to be fair to, you think, right, we've got to approach this strategically. So early in 2019, we decided to set up a little working group in the office, which was comprised right across the office, from the most junior people to senior people, a group of people, and they were a working group to determine what people wanted from their working lives in terms of flexible working in particular. And so we set up, so there was a questionnaire went around the office. And then what we did was, on the strength of that questionnaire, we set up a structure for flexible working, and we trialed it for 4 months. And we said to people, like, There's no, if it doesn't work across the office, doesn't work across teams, doesn't work, you know, somebody's flexible working can't be somebody else's problem, then, you know, we won't implement it. But in fact, and then after the 4 months, we then ran a survey, and I can't tell you the success rate this trial had, and almost we could measure it statistically. Sickness days went down, yes, and people felt they were being treated like adults, responsible adults. They could gauge their day or arrange their day such that they could deal with childcare, deal with the doctor's appointment, as long as it didn't affect anybody else's workload. And I must say, so that was all running really smoothly and well throughout 2019. And I think it was a really good entry for us as an office when COVID happened, actually, because we'd already had that experience of people being responsible. And in fact, they're committed and responsible, and people were just much happier. And I think it helped not only women being perhaps the primary child carers, but it also helped people who are caring for older parents or, you know, whoever. And it was so successful. I can't tell you. I surprised myself, actually, or I was really surprised by the outcome. But it was a good way to set it up.
Thank you very much. I think it's about the trust, isn't it? And
Yeah.
people just turn it back. And
well, what we found was people felt that it was almost that we were giving and they were giving. You know, they weren't just taking. Yes. So it did work.
Thank you very much. One more question from Architecture Moments. As a woman in architecture, you seem to have led quite a few roles altogether. We've heard about a few of them now. So if I could list a couple, it's an architect, obviously developer, contractor, competition judge, a lead, and a leader to others. Which one of those was the most challenging for you?
I'll tell you what.
And your favorite?
Being a main contractor.
Actually, yes.
That was really something else. And what it was one of our development projects where we, when we went out to tender, having got planning and done the tender documents, we could not make it work financially for us in line with what the banks were prepared to lend us. And we were doing this development with actually another developer. So it was a joint venture development. And they had experience of management contracting. And they said, look, why don't we try doing this, running this project with our experience as a management contractor. And we thought, okay. And we actually went out to tender to a lot of the subcontractors that had previously tendered to our main contractor. And you know, we got the price within what the bank would lend us. And so there it was. The development company was called City Wharf Development Company, and the contracting company was called City Wharf Contracting Company, but we used to call it COCO for comfort because we were so nervous about being main contractors. And I tell you, I really respect main contractors. One day I woke up and a crane had fallen over on a site somewhere in London. And, you know, I thought, oh no. And luckily it wasn't our site, but you realize the responsibility is huge and very wide ranging. on the upside, it was brilliant. I mean, people said to us, oh, surely you have conflicts of interest between being the developer and the architect and the contractor. And in fact, it was exactly the opposite. We were able to be nimble, make good decisions quickly, respond quickly. So there were real positives, but I do think that was one of the most challenging moments of my life.
I have a feeling that's the only route for us in the future as the profession changes now, but we'll see. One question from the public then, Artur Pawłowski is asking.
Okay, I'm leaving Artur. Artur is actually, I think, the first man to ask the question. So if we talk about the equality, let's Artur ask the question.
Yeah.
Except from me and Artur.
Of course. So Artur Pawłowski is asking,
I just unmuted Artur, so he can ask the question himself.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. All right. So I've got a question about requirements which residents or investors might have to the houses, how it changed during years. Is it different or is it always the same?
The requirements that, you mean the requirements of the brief?
Well, I mean the requirements about what they need in the house. Either it's gonna, for example, I don't know, 2-bedroom house, or it should have a massive kitchen, or it should have.
I mean, over a career as long as mine, it has changed. I mean, there are certainly different. I think now, if I were to headline this, I think that whole open plan, yes, is much more acceptable now than it was at the beginning of my career. I think the idea of having rooms with, if you without specific names, is another thing. I think evidently now people like or want or need the idea of having an office or a workroom or somewhere to put all of our computers, and it's not just in the corner of the living room. I think people are very much more aware of light, height of spaces, and I think bathrooms, there seems to be a proliferation of bathrooms. Yes, you might have as many bathrooms now in a private house as you do bedrooms, and that's definitely changed. So, and of course there's technology, and then there's energy, and there are all sorts of other things that, so it's continuously developing and evolving.
If I can contribute here, my wife is also an architect. She said the wine cooler now is a standard in
wine cooler, of course.
Houses.
I'm sure I've missed out more important things like that. Cinema rooms and things like that.
That's brilliant. I think it's like I think we have to wrap up. Artur, is that right?
That's what I think. Yes.
I may put. I took one like too many notes, but one is like from what you said. Family that eats together stays together. Well, we're not family, but we are kind of family of architects. So I would like to now invite you to a dinner once we have a chance. You know, the Polish.
That'd be lovely.
we'll keep in touch until that's possible.
That would be in Polish ognisko, of course.
Love that.
I'd like to take this opportunity, and I'm going to steal one more question in a minute, but I'd like to take this opportunity before I forget to thank everyone involved in preparation of that lecture, and also you, Teresa, for preparing this lovely presentation. My thanks go straight away to Miss Barbara Hamilton and Maxi Hamilton, who were behind that, and Dr. Teresa Clarence, who I think you got in touch directly with in the past, and this is how it happened. So thank you very much. And my last question, I would say, from Architecture Moments and in general for everyone involved here, and all ladies architects would be very much interested in that one, is Architect of the Year, Woman Architect of the Year 2015 award. Did that open many doors for you, additional doors?
Yes, it did. I mean, I was really reluctant to enter, and my office entered me. But actually, I tell you what it did was it made me feel very responsible in my role as, I suppose, as an example. And so I felt responsible, and actually I felt very focused on topic. But also, another way, whether this is good or bad, that whole year and the years after, whenever anybody needed somebody to represent a woman in architecture, it was just the go-to person. So of course it did open doors, because they thought, oh, well, we'll just have, she was Woman Architect of the Year there, we'll have her. So it made me do things that were out of my comfort zone. I was asked to write quite a bit, actually, for journals. And I would never say no, albeit, it's not my comfort zone. I actually felt good about doing things that I found difficult doing. But so yeah, it did open doors, and it was, I didn't realize it would, but it did.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You would hear clapping at the end, but unfortunately. So.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to meet you all.
So, silence, unless I manage to unmute, I don't think I see. I don't think I have that button, but anyway, we'll clap.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Teresa. It was fantastic, inspiring, uplifting, and a good lesson of architecture. Fantastic lesson of architecture.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for attending, and then we would actually invite you to the next one, and we'll keep you informed. Just
lovely.
Let us know, and then we'll inform about our next lectures.
Thank
Have
you.
a good evening, all.
You too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.